question not just for global labor economics, for international economics, for several areas of economics, but it's also an important question for many of us here in the business school. Many of us think of, may entertain the thoughts of, may keenly aspire to, whatever the level of involvement may be, to having jobs globally. Right. Our alumni have been placed in various international work centers, Singapore, Dubai, New York, and it's not out of the place to harbor such thoughts. And immigration policies of countries do enable or prevent such movements to a large extent. Right? International recruiters may look at you and say, this is a great person, I wish I could have her. However, if I take her, I have to go down the H1 visa route, and that is, I have to prove the impossible to get a visa, work visa for this person. Right? So immigration is an important question for the recruiter. Immigration, therefore, has a direct impact on your careers. Maybe not next month, but quite possibly 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. Right? So think of this when the question, obviously, Professor Mandal is going to talk about data, findings from data. Right? That's what empirical investigation is all about. What he has studied about immigration and about worker rights. Is there a connection there? Right? Which may, in a rather oversimplified, convoluted manner, form the core of some of the trends that we see around the world today. So it's an extremely timely topic. It's an extremely relevant topic, and I'm delighted and thrilled to invite Dr. Arindam Mandal to deliver this lecture. Do you have a guys that you can also use this if you want to walk around. Is the PowerPoint loaded here?
No. Okay. Is it better? Okay. So before I start, I want this session to be interactive, okay? Because fun is that in this kind of topics when I get to hear from you. I'm here for an exchange of ideas. Because I'm living in US since 2003. It's been 16 years. I've been teaching for last 15 years, literally, like, because as a graduate student, you had to teach. And I visit here every year, but it's always I get fascinated when I get to talk with very young people like you who are part of this changing India, who have big aspirations, and you visualize the world in a very different way. I'm here for an exchange. Before I start, let me give you a little background about from where I come from. I teach in Siena College, which is about 2.5 hours north of New York City. It's in the city of Albany, which is also the New York State capital. We have like here about 3,000 students. Primarily we have undergraduate programs with few master's programs like MBS and masters in accounting. Our college is a Catholic Franciscan college, though we are started by 7 Franciscan friars, but it's a very liberal college, and we have little interference by the church or anything like that. We rather believe in inclusiveness. We have students coming from all over the world, and we have our students visit 60 plus different countries every year. And this year I'm here, apart from presenting here, also to try to see if we can develop a student exchange program. Okay, let me come back to this topic, does immigration weaken worker rights and empirical investigation? Now this is a topic actually came up based on what's going on in the world, as Dean Chakravarti mentioned about Trump, right? And I'm sure you hear a lot about Trump all the time because, first of all, he's a showman, and he is very capable of keeping himself in the news, right? That's everywhere he is. So let's start with some of the things like Brexit or things like Make America Great Again. What do you guys associate with all these things? Brexit and Make America Great Again. What do you think? Yes. Why? Yeah.
Brexit basically refers to Britain exiting the European Union.
Okay.
And it's like if it exits European Union, many of the trade policies would be disturbed within the Europe. Europe will like broke apart, you can say.
That's,
Unity of the Europe will be disturbed.
that's right. So right now, if you're living in Europe, if you're part of the Eurozone, you pretty much move around countries. There's no barriers. For example, goods, people, and capital can flow from one country to another. For example, you can be living in Germany, you can just one day walk into United Kingdom and start working there, okay? But somehow under Brexit, what Britishers kind of voted for, they want to move away from that. Rather, they want to bring in more barriers to entry. That means entering their country would be much more difficult. Same about like Make America Great Again. Though this terminology itself is a very problematic one. Great about what, right? And often this is pretty much anti-globalization, anti-immigration, and anti-trade rhetoric that you are hearing, right? So let's talk about some of the commonalities, what is driving it, and then I'll try to motivate the stories. So as you can see in this cartoon, like it's America's biggest export, according to some of the populist thinkers in the US right now, is their jobs, was their claim. There's a growing distrust with globalization in the Western world. And this not only in US or Great Britain. It's also true in Germany. They have something called Alternative for Deutschland, AfD party, who are very right-wing, anti-immigration. Poland is a big, big concern. Though many people from Poland do work in other European Union countries, but Poland itself is very much anti-immigration. Same is true for Austria right now. And France, there's a big, big movement going on about closing the borders. So it's not only US or UK issue, it's kind of like right now a more developed countries issue, which is there's a big push against globalization the way we have seen it in the last 20 or 30 years since the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1989. Populism, this is populist ideas mainly supported by blue-collar workers who were traditionally very much well protected from these forces of global competition. And who are blue-collar workers? Factory workers, lower-level service job workers, people who are working in fast food industry, restaurants. These are common people who are revolted against this globalism that we have experienced. And India's evolution, what we are today, can very much be explained by the global policies that has been implemented, which is also called liberalization that we had in 1991 under Manmohan Singh as the finance minister and P.V. Narasimha Rao was the prime minister then. And more or less, all this pushback against two things, trade and immigration. And question arises, why? What's the reason? First, in today's lecture, I'm going to focus on immigration only. I will not talk about trade, because trade is a completely different ballgame. Right now, if you hear about, I'm sure you hear a lot about Trump saying, oh, we are going to impose a lot of tariffs on goods coming from India. I'm sure you have heard about that, right? Now, what's the impact of that? According to Trump, he thinks that, oh, if you impose tariffs, that means for Americans, it will be very, very expensive to buy American products, right? If it becomes very expensive, they'll stop buying the Indian products. That will help with the American company, okay? Whether it's going to happen or not is highly debated. Same with immigration. You hear all the time about this H-1B visa, this visa, that visa, all kind of barriers they're trying to impose. I'm sure if you have anybody in your family who are working in the informational technology sector, which is one of the biggest driving force about the growth in US that they have experienced over the last 20 years. If you go to places like Silicon Valley, it's run by the immigrants. If you go to places like Wall Street in New York City, it's run by immigrants. And it's immigrants from all over the world. If this is true, then why this pushback? What's going on? Okay? So let's talk about immigration and labor market. Let me give you some background information about immigration. You know, let me come down. I don't like the idea of like on a huge podium. Okay. There are out of 2017, there are 215 million migrants in this world. When I talk about migrants, these are the people who have crossed borders. Okay? To a list of Western developed countries. That's what, if you want to see it. Most of the Western European countries, North America are part of OECD. So bulk of this immigration actually happens in these OECD countries. Out of this 101 million, about 43.7 million are in the United States. What share? Is about 13.5% of the US population is foreign born. That means they are born outside the United States. Same is true for Germany. They have 14.8% of the German population are foreign born. Same is UK. 14% of the UK population is foreign born. Compared to this, what do you think is the number for India? What proportion of our, how many? 5%? We have like, what, 1.2 billion people. Only 5 million are foreign born in India. And by the way, the reason we have 5 million foreign born, because of the 1947 incident, a lot of people are born in erstwhile Bangladesh or Pakistan, right? Primarily based on race. That means if you come from some of the European countries, you have a preference. For Asians who are particularly banned from entering the United States. This was a big, big controversial issue. However, after World War II, they passed Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. What they did, they removed all the racial barriers to immigration and naturalization, so race didn't become a factor there. What happened, they maintained the national quotas. What is national quotas? That means they said only so many people can come from a particular country. Okay? Now you can imagine, like when you put national quotas, in a backdoor way, it's still very much race-based because you are trying to proportionalize things based on certain quotas. Then things changed in 1965, which is a big change. There was an amendment in 1965 where immigration law Congress replaced the national origin system with preference system designed to reunite immigrant families and attract skilled immigrants to the United States. This is the first time US started recognizing, mind you, it's almost 20 years since World War II. And 1960s was the golden age of American capitalism. If you hear like that sweet movies about the 1960s, it's always about how people were so happy in the 1960s and 70s. That's the golden age of American capitalism. Suddenly, these countries realized, oh, they don't have enough people. They need more people to work on things. So they started changing the immigration policies where they said, okay, skill is an important factor. So this is the first time skilled immigration became a rallying point for the American system. Now, this story went on till the 1990s, and things changed drastically in the 1990s with the Immigration Act of 1990, which revamped the immigration selection system once again. Mind you, immigration selection system. So it's not that anybody can show up in the door. So they are consciously choosing who can move to the United States, which is a very, very important thing. So, Immigration Act of 1990 increased the number of available immigrant visas and revised the preference categories governing permanent legal immigration. What is permanent legal immigration? Basically, people who can permanently reside in the United States and can eventually become a citizen of that country. What they did, immigrant visas were divided into now 3 broad categories. One is family sponsored, second is employment based, and third is diversity. Now, what is family sponsored? Now, US is one of those countries where they believed in reuniting the families from different parts of the world, because even prior to World War II, even during World War I and prior to that, there a lot of immigration happened in US for various reasons. So this family-sponsored thing was about bringing the families together. So if one member of the family came, they had the ability to bring in other close members of their family to the United States. Employment-based, this is based on type of jobs available. And finally, diversity. Okay, this is a very interesting one. So US said that, like we need to have people from all over the world. How do you ensure that people from all over the world can come to the United States? So they had something called random lotteries. Now, if your country has less than certain number of people in the United States, which by the way, India is like US are more than that in the 1960s, so India is not part of that. It's primarily countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, to an extent Pakistan, Bhutan, and all these countries fall under this diversity, where they randomly pick number of people and they give them permanent residency to move to the United States and start working there, irrespective of their education, language skills, or anything. Okay, it's just randomly you pick up somebody and bring into the United States. Excuse me. So so these immigration policies of the 1990s are primarily driven by forces of globalization. Why? This is where this famous H-1B visa came up, 1990 Immigration Act, which India is the largest recipient in the whole world. I think more than 70% of the H-1 visa goes to Indians. And that's due to what? Why? How India has been able to capture more than 70% of the H-1 visas. These are work visas, highly skilled work visas. It's because of the information technology sector, right? Mind you, 1990s is the time when computers started coming in. And they were, as a result, India invested in this kind of information technology services. Because of that, today, companies like TCS, Infosys, or Satyam is regarded some of the top, at least, IT companies in terms of their ability to outsource the jobs. Now, what is the outsourcing model? Where basically, in the old days, companies used to have their in-house facilities. Now, that's very expensive for companies because you need to develop a certain information technology system. Once it is developed, what do you do with those people? So they started outsourcing to these specialized companies. Their job is to make sure the system is running properly. That's how this outsourcing business came up. And that's the famous, one of the perhaps most popular way to get a work visa or ability to work in the United States is through H-1B visa. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay, let's move on. Now the question is how immigration affects labor market. That's the question we're trying to answer, and then I'll move to labor rights. Now, how many of you have taken managerial economics? I believe you are in MBA programs, most of you, right? Anybody from the managerial economics?
The classes have not started yet.
So, classes have not started yet? Or how many of you enrolled in managerial economics this? I'm sure most of you have done demand and supply, right? Demand and supply analysis. So when you have too much of something, that means too much supply of something. Let's say you are running a clothing store, and you realize there are only, like, say, demand for 200 shirts, but you ended up buying 500 shirts, and you have to sell 500 shirts. What do you do? How do you sell those? Reduce the price, right? You, in a market economy, you reduce the price, right? That's it. So economists tend to understand immigration from a very microeconomic perspective. They argued that when a bunch of people from the outside the country came in, what's going to happen? There are now too many people are willing to take up a job. That means there's an increased supply of labor, right? When there are too many people willing to take up a job, what's going to happen? Wages will go down, right? And that's how most of the economists argue. Like, so, and in a policy circle, this was a very dominant thought for some time. They thought, like, oh, you are bringing in immigrants, they'll be taking up jobs of the native people. Native people means people who are born in a particular country, who are born in a country, and as a result, that will have negative impact on wages of the native people, right? As a result, what happened? If this is true, trade, globalization, immigration started perceived as a threat to domestic economy and for global economic dominance by average voters in US. So in UK, so in Germany, so in France, so in Austria, so in Poland. So they started visualizing immigrants as the group of people who are there to take away their jobs, not only their jobs, also depress the wages. Okay? And there comes our Mr. Trump, make America great again. And what's his policy? He has a very simple economic agenda. Hire American, limit immigrant visas, and make hiring American workers a priority. So that's his, and it resonated very, very well with blue-collar workers. Because what they have seen. Now, if you go to any of the supermarkets in the US, you'll be surprised. Most of the stuffs are either made in China, made in Mexico, or made in India, made in Bangladesh. There's barely anything that's manufactured in the United States, okay? Now, why this is so? The reason is simple. The reason is that US specializes in high-end manufacturing. So if you own an iPhone, right, this is one of the, like, wonders of modern technology, right? iPhone, which basically changed in the last 10 years, 12 years, the way we use phone. Today, we can pretty much get done most of our work using a phone. And we can't think of living a life without the smartphones of today. So in the iPhone, if you flip on the back side, it's written, designed in California, assembled in China. Why? Now, this is the age of specialization. US is very, very good in designing, this kind of high-tech designing stuffs, where China is very good in assembling things. So in a simple phone, where parts are coming from all over the world, they're going to China, they assemble it, and they're sending it to throughout the world, including India. So if you're buying an iPhone in India, it's made in China, or assembled in China. Okay? So, and that's good, right? Otherwise, if you're trying to produce iPhone the way it is in US, I believe that would be costing around $3,000, which is like what? Like more than 2 lakh rupees. It doesn't make sense. How many people will be buying those phones if it costs you more than 2 lakh, right? But because it's assembled in China, we can get it at a, though it's not inconsequential, it's very expensive, like 50, 60, 70,000 rupees in Indian rupees. Still, it's 1/3, 1/4 of what the price would be. However, the story is actually much more complicated. Because Trump and all these populists are trying to tell a story which is very one-sided. Okay? So I'm going to make the story much more complicated, then you'll see the connections, what I'm trying to say. So this is the US population dynamics. What it is showing that in 1950, now what is Social Security retirement system? So it's a national pension system. So you work, when you work, you put certain money by you and your employer into a Social Security system. Once you turn certain age, typically it's 59 and a half, you are eligible for a pension from the United States government till your death. Okay? So that's national pension system. If you go to 1950, the number of people who were drawing this national pension, the Social Security, versus those who are not drawing was 16:1. That means every one person who was drawing a national pension, the 16% who was not drawing it because they are working. They are working as they're younger. Right? By 1960, that number is 5:1. By 2015, it is 3:1. By 2035, it is 2:1. So what does it mean for the US population? It's aging, right? They're getting older. And think about the pressure on the national pension system, Social Security system. You don't have enough working people. You have a huge group of retirees who are have claims on the Social Security system. The whole system will literally kind of like disintegrate if they don't do anything. So here's the thing, US needs more working age population and not less. And limited immigration, and here's the problem. If they have limited immigration, this would adversely affect skilled foreign workers and hence would hurt productivity of US companies. Because productivity is something which drives modern economies. Now think about how in today's world, as of today, we can get done things, more things we are able to get done than perhaps we were able to do 20 years back. Simply because we have access to technology and we know how to use it. That's what you guys are trained in, right? This shortage of skilled immigrants will strain the already declining labor force and will affect long-term growth prospect for the United States. Okay? Now, if you don't have working age people, and mind you, this is a huge problem in some of the countries like Japan. Japan is in constant stagnation for the last 20 years, which is very well known. Like it's a constant recession for the last 20 years. And the reason they are under recession, one of the big reasons is that they have very tight immigration policies. If you're trying to go to Japan and work, good luck. Outcome of that, today in Japan, a person of your age might be not only supporting your own family, you are supporting your parents, you are supporting your parents' parents, in some cases you are supporting your parents' parents' parents because Japanese live more than 100 years. And now think about in an economy, if one person needs to support another 3 or 4 generations, what you are left with? What you are going to do? You can't save, you can't consume enough because you're supporting them. So it's a real nightmare for many countries. So it's true for some of the Scandinavian countries where population is not only like aging, it's declining, where actually population is shrinking. We are facing the problem of increasing population, though it's kind of now tapering off, but there is actually declining. Okay? And finally, when you have less working age population, that means less tax revenues, because not enough people are working, they are not paying taxes, which means that less social programs, less Medicare, less social security. So the argument I'm trying to make here is that demand and supply argument about effects of immigrants on wage is not the right story. Because what I'm showing you here, immigrants can play an important role here by providing support to the existing labor force. So let me explain it a little bit more. So let's talk about the little bit of literature review and wisdom. So here's the most studies find about immigration. Most studies find no large adverse impact on the wages and employment opportunities for the native-born population due to immigration. That's more or less standard across most of the studies, serious studies that has been done. They find no adverse effect of immigration on native wages and employment. This is all about perception. Okay? Rather, studies showed that immigrants complemented the native workers and hence increased productivity. Let me give you a very simple example. So, in the US context, you hear about a lot of Mexicans coming to the United States, right? You hear all the time, like whenever you hear Mr. Trump saying something, oh, Mexicans are coming in, they are filling up the whole United States. Now, where Mexicans work? Most of the Mexicans who enter United States undocumented, which is basically they walked into the country, they either work in the agricultural sector or in the building trade sector. Now, let me give you an example of agricultural sector. In the agricultural sector, it's still not very mechanized. Like, you know, like certain crops, you need human hands to pick up things. But the problem is that labor is very expensive in US. If you're legally working in US, you are in state of New York. Now the minimum wage is $11.50 an hour. If you work for 1 hour, your minimum wage legally should be $11.50, which means 800 rupees an hour. And typically full-time job involves 40 hours a week. Okay? So that's. Now, if you go to the agriculture sector, this minimum wage law does not apply, which is because these are laws apply in the industrial sector. Now, how much those agriculture sector is willing to pay? No, they would love to pay you, maybe if in higher side, maybe $2 an hour for working 14 hours a day under the hot sun. The problem is this, most of the native workers perhaps don't want to do that work. Where do you get the workers? That's where perhaps these poor Mexicans who come into this country, in US, they end up working. Okay? Because, first of all, they are undocumented, and second thing is this, is better than perhaps what they are making in their own country. So, in a way, they complemented the native workers. Think about it, if they were not there, that means native workers would not be getting their daily supply of fresh vegetables. It would have impact on the rest of the economy. Same in the building trade, right? You need workers to kind of like carry stuffs. Now, problem is this, in the building trade in the US, like the people who build buildings and stuff, they're considered highly skilled workers. And they are, because they are paid way above the minimum wage. So if you are a road maintenance worker, people who make roads, you can be assured you'll be making around $35 to $40 an hour. If you're a bridge painter, person who paints big bridges, I'm talking about figures which I last saw maybe 10 years back, it was close to $90 an hour. Yes. Why this is so? oh, those guys are very efficient. Once they make the road, you will have 0 complaints. Once they paint the bridges, 0 complaints. That's what they do. However, you need helpers. And think about if the person who is charging $30, $40, or $100 an hour needs to do a job which is less productive. It's a wastage of his time. Because you want your best person in the best of the job. So who is going to do the low productive job? That's where many of the immigrants do come in. So they complemented, they actually increased the productivity of the native workers. Since they increase the productivity of native workers, that helps with the economy. And studies also show that if there is enough capital in the economy, capital means enough resources available, you can always absorb more labor. If you have enough machines, enough factories, what's the problem of absorbing labors? You can easily absorb them, right? Because there are facilities available. Okay? So let me talk about a few additional facts about immigration. Studies found that US immigrants earn less than natives when entering the country. But converse to the native wage level in 15 years, and here's an interesting fact. After 30 years, immigrants were found to earn more than natives of similar age and education. So immigrants do play a very important role in increasing the productive capacity of the countries like the United States. Okay? And is often lead to better outcome for those people. Otherwise, why would somebody go? Okay, here's the research question. So here's the problem, and why I'm focusing on labor laws. So most prior studies focus on various labor market effects of immigration, like wages, employment, unemployment, all this stuff. There's a lack of literature which documented the effects of immigration on labor market institutions such as labor laws. Now, why is a lack of interest in this? In the developed countries, the idea is that labor law is a set deal, which means that laws they passed between the first 2 world wars and after World War II were there and they are not changing. But the fact is that those laws have changed. Okay? And I'll show you how those laws have changed. So here is the research question. So my primary research question is this: what is the impact of immigration on labor market institutions such as employment protection laws? Now, what are employment protection laws? That means laws which says that you cannot just fire a worker out of him. You need to give that person certain number of advance notice. You need to provide certain kind of compensation if you're firing that person. These are different employment protection laws. It includes things like whether you can unionize or not. I know in India there's a big move since the 1990s about deregulating the labor market, which means that you can hire and fire at whim. Now the problem is this, again, from economic perspective it sounds great that if you can fire workers, that means you can hire the right kind of people. But what economists started realizing nowadays is that it creates a lot of disincentive from the worker side. Think about if you know your employer can fire you at will anytime they want, would you ever like to give your 100% to that company? Most probably no, right? Why would you? Because you know this person is not very keen on keeping me for a long time. So this is a new area. So, but this particular story is moving around immigration and its effects on employment protection laws. Here are some theoretical considerations. As I said, economists generally agree that immigration has positive impact on overall economy, but the extent of benefits is up for debate. Because sometimes some economists show that yes, it benefits, but it benefits certain group of people. I'm not getting into that debate. But here's the problem. Problem is that immigrants do bring their own culture, expectation, taste, and beliefs in the destination economy, which is very much specific to the immigrant individuals. For example, like when if you go to US and you find Indians, they're always looking for Indian restaurants. And if you're from Southern India, definitely you are looking for Savana Bhavana, right? So there are a lot of Savana Bhavana nowadays. So you'll not be surprised that it's a middle of nowhere city, but there might be a couple of Indian restaurants. We bring our own culture, own beliefs to a particular country. And that's very natural. We are all human beings, right? That's very natural. As immigrants integrate more in their new home, they can play a pivotal role in bringing significant changes in the existing norms and institutions prevalent in the destination country. Because moment you have more than 10% of the people who are immigrants, they can bring in a lot of changes. So it was not surprising when Trump was running for presidency in 2016, he made a YouTube ad in Hindi. And that, I don't know how many of you have seen that ad. You read what he said? To Trump Sarkar. Think about it. And I'm talking about just Indians, like 14% is not Indians, 14% like percent of US population is not. Indians are like what, less than 1% perhaps. Still type of impact that particular communities can have. So often these immigrants can come in and they can change or try to bring in changes in the labor laws which can be different than what it was in existence before, okay? Now, question is how to measure labor rights or protection laws, okay? This is a big, big issue because law is the law. It's written in the Constitution. Now, this is a big research area right now. So, Cambridge University recently came up with something called Cambridge Labor Regulation Index. And it has a lot of subcomponents. What is this? What is this Cambridge Labor Regulation Index? It's a leximetric approach. It's a basis for quantifying legal rules. So basically, there's some kind of rights in your constitution. That means you have the right to unionize in your constitution. How to quantify it? So they've been able to quantify that number. Now, once you can do quantification, you can run statistical analysis. So so it's a de jure measure. That means it's a measure which is documented in the Constitution, which is written somewhere. Whether it's implemented or not, that's not my concern. Whether it's documented or not. For example, India, one of my friend who is a designer and passed out of NID, he was telling me the other day, India has some of the most restrictive fire regulation laws in the world. So if you're trying to follow fire regulations in India, if you're trying to design a restaurant or something, it's next to impossible to follow that law. So there's a law in the Constitution, doesn't mean that it gets implemented. But here I'm primarily concerned about what law written in their Constitution, okay? So whether it's implemented or not, I'm not getting into that argument. So what CVR-LRI does, it aggregates into 40 distinct aspects of labor regulation classified into five general areas, and I'm coming to those general areas. And each aspect is coded between 0 to 1. So 1 means the law is very specific and is written. 0 means there's nothing written in the Constitution. And there's also numbers can be 0.33 or 0.67 depending on the strength of the law. Okay? And it captures 40 different labor protection laws. So higher than 1 means better protected, 0 means no protection at all. Okay? So what are these 5 categories? First is legal parity of different forms of employment, which is there are 8 different subcategories. That means there are 8 different aspects. These things like how do you classify people like Uber drivers? If you ask Uber, they try to say they are contract workers. And one of the fight that's going on Uber drivers in many parts of this world is that Uber drivers are demanding that they should be recognized as employee of Uber. Now, moment they are recognized as employees of Uber, what does it mean? That means if a driver is working for certain hours, they need to be paid at least the minimum wage, which can be very expensive for Uber. Okay? So, or things like non-permanent jobs, how this is codified in your constitution. For example, in France or Germany, I know for Germany, if you work for 6 months in a company, even as a contractual position, if your job extends from 6 months plus 1 day, they need to offer you permanent position. So these are laws which are there to protect the existing workers. Regulation of work time, that means how many hours you need to work and all those aspects. That's also, there are 7 different aspects. It can have score between 0 to 7. Dismissal procedures, these are 9 different aspects are captured under this. So dismissal procedures can have 0 to 9. Employee representation rights, these are right to bargain, right to unionize. It's a responsibility of the companies to bargain with the unions and all this stuff. There are 7 different things under it. Again, 0 means nothing is protected, 7 means most protected in terms of representation rights. Finally, right to industrial action. Can you go and give dharna? By the way, this is illegal in some certain parts of this world. You cannot do that. Okay? And there are like 9 different aspects. So all of them are aggregated together and they call aggregate labor regulation index, which is varies between 0 to 40. So if you add all these things up, that comes to 40. 40 is the maximum. Mind you, there are 40 different aspects are codified. 0 means absolutely no rights. 40 means extremely well protected. Okay? So this is some of the labor rights in OECD countries, total. So this is this aggregate labor regulation index in some of the countries from the time 1981 till 2011. And what you see, these are like 20 countries I looked into. This is Australia, Austria, Belgium. And you can see certain countries, it remained flat, it increases, decrease. Austria, it kind of increased a little bit. Belgium, it increased, it remained flat, it increased a little bit. Canada, it's remained more or less flat. In certain countries, for example, New Zealand is a clear decline. Or in UK, there's a big decline at some time, it increased. So it's not a set deal. That's the point I was trying to make. Often if you ask a Western person, you think that labor law is a set deal, but it's not. It did change a lot in the last 40 years, 30 years. And you can see for each of the, sorry, these graphs are not very clear, but you get a sense like anything that's going up, that means labor laws are getting better. Anything that's going down, that means labor are getting weakened, which is going against the workers. Okay. This is employee representation right, that means right to unionize. And you can see UK, it's a clear decline. In New Zealand, it's a clear decline. In Greece, it declined in the end. Germany has remained fixed, but at a very high level. Spain, it increased, but then it declined recently. Sweden, it went up, then it started declining here. Australia, it's a clear decline. So these are Western world. These are perhaps very well protected labor laws. And where unions remain the basis for their post-World War II growth experience. And here we are seeing a clear, some countries, not all, a clear weakening of employee representation rights. Okay? So, any questions? Okay. So let's do some empirical analysis, okay? So I'll try to keep it very simple. So our dependent variable, that means the variable we're trying to understand is Cambridge Labor Regulation Index. Because question we're asking, does immigration has any impact on employment protection or labor regulations? And our variable of interest is share of foreign-born population as share percentage of the total population in that country, right? That's what our main variable of interest. Controls now, there are 10,000 factors that can affect labor laws. So you need to control for those factors. Now, if we have not taken econometrics or statistical analysis, these are the standard ways of doing things. So I'm just going to try to give you the intuition behind what's going on. So you need to control for factors like level of per capita GDP, that means what's the level of the economy of that country. COF, index of economic globalization. Now, often globalization is seen as one of the key factors that driving changes. So if I want to figure out the effects of immigration, so I have to keep the globalization part separate. Trade share of GDP. Trade is another aspect that captures how well integrated the country is. Things like ruling party, kind of government they have. If you have a right government, right means very conservative government, you can expect less of labor laws. On the other hand, if a left government, you have expectations of much better labor laws. And finally, union density, how unionized the country is. So that will give you an idea like already what kind of protection is there. Okay. Some methodological considerations, I'll just fly through because these are, now the empirics we ran on 20 OECD countries for the period 1981 to 2011. I looked into 20 OECD countries, okay? Here's the biggest problem. So regression is all about causality. I'm trying to say immigration affects labor rights. But there's a problem of reverse causality. What is reverse causality? It means that somebody can come and say, well, hold on. There might be a chance immigrants are moving to a countries where there are better protection of labor. Then causality runs other way. Causality is that if there are better protection of labor rights, that leads to more immigration. So what's the causality? So this is a problem of reverse causality. And this is a very technical statistical issue, and thankfully there are statistical techniques to take care of this reverse causality issue, something called instrumental variable approach. And I'm not going to talk much about instrumental variable at this point of time because that's technique part, rather I'm more interested in the story. And the estimation methodology, estimation that means I want to see statistically what's the impact, right? Is it positive, negative, is it significant? So we use system GMM approach, okay? So let's not worry about this here, that's not important. And here's the empirical results. I'm going to first summarize the results, then I'll show you the actual statistical numbers. Here's the interesting fact that we found out. Regression results suggest that immigration has positive impact on protection of labor rights. Okay? And this goes very well with the existing literature. What our existing literature says, immigration has positive impact on the economy. If immigration has positive impact on the economy, which essentially means that immigration is not detrimental to the protection of labor rights. Because often, if you go to there's a rhetoric going on, and again, it's a false rhetoric. The thinking goes like this in many of the Western world nowadays, is that foreigners not only coming to their country and weakening the labor market, they are also weakening the local institutions. And at least this study counteract that story. And if you are interested in actual numbers, I'm interested in this, right? And you can see this is positive, and this stars means degrees of significance. That means you can say what confidence I can say these numbers will hold for some other samples as well, okay? And you can see this is highly positive numbers. So what's the important takeaway point? Important takeaway point is that whatever people say about immigration in the developed countries, there's a lot of false impression about what immigration is doing to the economy. Studies have shown again and again, immigration always worked positively for those countries. And this study, when extending those results and trying to claim that immigration not only leads to positive economic outcome for those countries, this also leads to better institutional outcome for those countries in terms of protection of labor laws. And that's where this whole story kind of fit in the bigger picture. And other variables, I'll not spend much time. So I don't know if you have any questions or anything. Any questions, anything I can answer? Yes?
I was just very interested, what would be the reason that immigration does lead to, has a positive impact on the global?
Is the institutional structure. That's what because when immigrants come in, as I said, immigration often starts with very low level, right? There are very few people who start as doctors or engineers. If you see most of the immigrants, they're starting with driving taxis. Okay? So they know what the struggle for the local labor is to put all those people to work. But if these immigrants are coming, and if they have enough capital available to engage all those immigrants, that will work towards the benefit of the country. Yes?
Wasn't Japan majorly focused on the quaternary sector rather than the secondary sector? Secondary sector, you need more capital.
When we talk about capital in modern economics, we are not only talking about physical capital, we are also talking about human capital, ability to do a job. Japan, the problem was that you have this aging population, right? And now they have highly developed technological sectors. But since they had kind of moratorium on any kind of immigration, rather their immigration should be more focused on people who will be able to come in and work into those high-end technology sectors. That's where comes this skilled immigration. Why do you think US has the H-1B visa? Why can't they have an open visa for it? Why there is a skill requirement? Because they know that they need people who can be easily fit into those jobs, which is right now available. Yes? More population than whole of Alaska. So what Alaska is telling, if you go and settle in Alaska, yeah, it's like a big, like it's a substantial states in US, for example, in Vermont, which is one of the northeastern state, which is really, really classic case of declining population. A lot of younger people moving out. So they are giving a lot of incentives for especially refugees who are coming to the United States to settle in those states. So they're giving you free space to open up shops, language training, and this kind of incentives they're trying to give. So there are ways, but again, mind you, like immigration is a very tricky thing, right? You really don't want to see your community changing really, really fast in front of you. But when we talk about immigration in these countries, we are talking about cultural issues, we are talking about race-related issues, we are now talking about there's a religion dynamics. There's so many different things coming in. So it's not only like economy always, it's there are other factors. Yes? That only undocumented workers is there, because the rhetoric is going against the whole immigrant community. So that's the problem, right? So, yes.
If you look at the traditional Aristotle model, and so north-south model, one of the main determinants of migration is wage differential. So in this particular case, I mean, how important wage differential is, and is there possibly any kind of interaction effect between the wage differential and labor laws, labor rights?
But these are, I'm only looking at OECD countries, right? So all of them have pretty much similar level of wage, right? So that's a good point. But in this study, perhaps it's not that. Yes, because these are all same level of development. So they are pretty much similar.
So it's not a north to north.
Yeah, it's a north, yeah. Like, for example, EU, European Union, most of the migration happened within EU. Like, is that Polish people going to Western Europe to work, or Romanian people?
I was thinking about you, right? So, for example, Eastern European countries and Western European countries. So, there might be I don't know. Is there a umbrella minimum wage law across Europe?
Yeah, but when I look at the OECD countries, I just looked at the high-income OECD countries. So I didn't look into Eastern European countries because Eastern European countries, in 1981, they had a communist rule. So that's why I didn't include those countries. I just looked into Western European, highly developed. Yes.
There were graphs for lot of countries, there were graphs, and those represented the weakening or raising of the labor cost.
Yes, that's, let me show you. Yeah.
The question is that, so this is actually the question, the documented laws or the implementation.
These are the documented laws. Document, that's a DGO. These are not implementation. Nothing to do with implementation. Exactly. So once the documented laws change, because documented laws change, it takes some time to change. Once this is changed, you can imagine why it's changed. It may not be always for the good reasons, right? Good point. No, at least in this, mind you, this is a cross-country study, 20 countries over 30 years. We are averaging out a lot of things. So what we are finding, on an average, immigrants has positive impact on labor protections.
And I would like to give him a note of thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming here. Thanking him on behalf of all of us, everyone in JGBS and JGU. It's really interesting that he has his lecture today was on immigration, because it is not only very topical, but also how many of you here are JGBS students? All of you, right? So all of you are MBA students. BBA students, right? Fantastic. It doesn't matter whether you're in MBA or in BBAs, you will be having microeconomics the first semester. So from tomorrow onwards, you'll have microeconomics class. For the MBAs, I'll take a microeconomics class on Monday. And we will be discussing a lot about labor market microeconomics. The two papers, one he has mentioned, David Kurt's paper on medial forklift and its impact on Miami labor market is 1990. Another paper. So basically what I was talking about, that what happens with lots of labor influxes, it suppresses the wage, and what happens when you see suddenly in an area, in a state, the wages are pretty much suppressed. The government has to step in and they have to increase the minimum wage. We do not have much of a minimum wage law in India, but in other countries there are. So what happens when you raise the minimum wage? Then again, there is a possibility of unemployment. So David Card and Alan Kruger comes up with another seminal paper in 1992, which looked at the impact of minimum wage laws on unemployment. So both of these papers we will be discussing in the class from a different perspective altogether. He has traveled 8,000 miles to be here with you, and he's leaving tomorrow. Right? He'll be going back to New York tomorrow. So from his extremely busy schedule, he has taken time out to come here. So please, a very big round of applause for him. One thing Dr. Mandal has mentioned at the beginning of his lecture, we already have a working partnership with Siena College. Right? So Siena College is about 250 kilometers north of New York City. It takes about 3 hours to get to New York City, center of the universe. And it's a very pretty place, loud and big. Our collaboration with Siena College works on many levels. Of course, for you, what would be most important? You probably take interest in knowing that we are also looking to have a student exchange. It's a bilateral exchange. The students from there will be coming here, sitting in our MBA classes or in other classes, and students from here will go there and spend some time there. So if any of you are interested in exploring those opportunities, you're more than welcome to talk to him after this gets over. So he'll be here for another 10-15 minutes. Please use your time. And I would like to officially end this session here by calling Dr. Chitresh Kumar to hand Dr. Mandal some JGBS memento. It's not much, but you'll remember of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, please.